With the way grocery prices are rising, don't you wish you had the ability to freeze prices in their tracks? What if I told you there is a way? Hey guys, I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome to our channel. If you're interested in prepping and self-sufficiency, this is the place for you. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Right now, we are living through unprecedented times for so many reasons. I'm sure you've noticed the rapidly rising grocery prices that have been affecting us all. I know it's certainly changed my habits at the grocery store. I find myself walking right by a lot of things that I intended to pick up because I just simply don't want to or can't pay those prices. One area that's gone up a lot is meats. Not only inflation, but also the rising costs for farmers and ranchers of feed and every other element that goes into raising livestock have contributed to these rising prices. Possibly the hardest hit of all of them has been chicken, because on top of all those other factors, we also had the bird flu outbreak that had them culling millions and millions of birds. So I'm going to show you this chart, and it lays out the average price of chicken breast in the US. And this chart starts all the way back in 2006. And you can see there's just your typical normal fluctuations up and down. And then you see here at the end, it goes up to May or June of 2022. And the price just skyrockets straight into the stratosphere. I have not bought chicken in some time because of how much the prices have risen. One of the many benefits of storing food and keeping a well-stocked pantry is that you have a lot more control over your purchasing. So I was very happy to finally see a decent sale on chicken breast. Now, mind you, this decent sale was $1.99 a pound, which used to be my top price cutoff, meaning that that was the price that I could expect to get at any time if I was to run out of chicken in my freezer, which never happened, and be forced to run out and pick some up without any sale. $1.47 was the sale price I usually stocked up on. Now I was happy to find it on sale for $1.99. Now mind you, these are the prices in my region here in Maine because prices can vary quite a bit depending on what area of the country that you're in. So seeing that sale, I jumped at the chance and I went out and bought 4 of the family packs, which were about 4.5 pounds a piece, maybe a little more. And we did break into one of the packs and pull some out for supper that night. But now what I'm going to do is take the rest and can it up. And that chicken is going to be shelf stable because, you really can't count on your freezer for preparedness. Freezers are great, but they're more about convenience. In a grid down emergency, you very well may lose anything you have in your freezer. Even if you have generators, there are still so many factors that come into play. It's always smart not to count on your freezers as part of your preparedness food storage plan. Heck, it doesn't even have to be a grid down SHTF event for you to lose the food in your freezer. It could just be the appliance fails or a kid leaves the door open, both of which have happened to me, by the way. So I know from experience not to rely on my freezers. So by canning the chicken, it becomes shelf stable and not grid reliant. And what's even better, no matter how high the prices go, anytime I open one of these jars, we'll be eating chicken for $1.99 a pound. Just like any cans I've canned before, I can open now and be eating chicken for $1.47 a pound or $1.77 and so on and so forth. By preserving the chicken, we're also preserving those prices. Canning chicken is super easy and it doesn't take a ton of expensive equipment. I just have the most basic, inexpensive canning equipment around. It's so simple, but it's a very important skill, especially with the state of the world today. So I'm going to show you how I can this chicken. I'm going to be using both my stovetop canner and my electric pressure canner, so you can see how it's done in both of those ways. I'll be canning some plain chicken, cold pack, raw pack, fondly referred to by some people as ugly chicken. That's great for opening up for casseroles, skillet dishes, tacos, even to whip up some chicken salad because the chicken is going to be fully cooked by the time the canning process is done. I'll also be canning a complete chicken recipe with sauce that's ready to open, heat, and eat just as it is. So come along and I will show you how I do it. So I've got my chicken breast here and I'm just going to start by cutting my chicken breast up into chunks. It's really a very simple process. It doesn't really matter too much what size your chunks are, just a good sized chunk that you'd like to use in a recipe. These will break up very easily after they've been pressure canned. They'll be completely cooked. So the size of the chunks is not that important. Just going to make chunks about like that. Now while I work, I do have my jars in the dishwasher. I'm going to be using pint jars, wide mouth pint jars. Wide mouth will make it a lot easier for me to get this chicken out of the jar than the regular mouth. And I'm using pints because that should be just about They're 2-cup jars, and that's going to hold about a pound of chicken. So I think that's a good amount for a recipe. And if I needed more chicken than that, I would just open up 2 jars. Now I have my jars in the dishwasher. It's not to sanitize them or sterilize them. When you're pressure cooking, you really don't need to sanitize or sterilize your jars and lids, because the temperature that you're going to be canning this at is going to be sufficient to kill anything in those jars. And my jars are pretty clean anyway, so I'm not really worried about that. It's really just because they are a little bit dusty because they've been stored in my basement. They're used jars, and so they were open, and when I store those, I store them in the box that they came in, and I store them upside down so dust can't get inside of them, but just in case, you never know, so I'm giving them a quick run through the dishwasher. Now, as you're cutting, you don't have to worry too much about removing all the fat, because it's okay if some fat is in your jars. That's just going to give it some extra flavor, but I am going to try to cut off, you know, the really gristly, nasty pieces that have little bits of whatever on them. So anything that looks like it's, you know, not going to be a good piece, you can cut that off, but don't worry about the fat so much. It also doesn't matter a whole lot if all of your pieces are exactly the same size. I mean, it's going to be a lot more convenient for certain recipes if they are about the same size, but it's not going to matter that much. So don't worry too much about getting them all the same size. Now I am going to start filling my jars as I go, because I just don't want to have to use a separate dish or bowl to hold all this chicken and dirty up something extra. So give me just a minute. I'm going to go grab some of my jars that are freshly clean out of the dishwasher, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got my jars out of the dishwasher. They're a little bit warm, but they're certainly not hot, because we're doing raw pack and cold pack with this, and you want everything to be the same temperature. So when you're doing cold pack, you want cold jars. You want to start with a cold canner. That's going to avoid any kind of heat shock that could break your jars. But these are not warm enough that I'm worried about it, and the cool chicken is going to cool these jars right down. So I have got my favorite canning funnel. I don't know if you can see that it's got headspace measurements marked right along the collar, and so that really helps. Now with chicken, when you're pressure canning chicken, you want to leave 1.25 inches of headspace, and this only goes down to 1 inch, but you can see these are each 1/4 inch markings, and so I know that if I go that far below the bottom of my collar, I'll be all set. And I just like using this funnel just to make sure that I keep my rims a little bit cleaner. Now I would be able to fit this into my jars no problem without the funnel, so if you don't have a funnel for this project, it's a-okay. And I am going to use this utensil to pack this down as tightly as I can. I don't love touching raw meat with my hands, so if you really, really are squeamish, you could always use gloves for this, but I decided to just bite the bullet and get over it and just touch it with my hands. But I'm going to use this tool to press it down. You want to make sure to get out as many air spaces as you can and leave as little airspace down there as you can, because we're not going to add any liquid to this. So basically the chicken is going to create its own broth and its own liquid. And the less space that we have down there to fill, the more the broth and juice will rise up and cover the chicken, because it is okay if some of your meat sticks out of the juices that are created when it cans. That happens all the time, but it doesn't look that appetizing. And so the less airspace we can have and the more the juices can rise up and cover the chicken, the better it's going to look. But this chicken is affectionately referred to by many people as ugly chicken, and that's part of the reason why. So you can expect that it's not going to look amazing. All right, so that does look like when it's really packed down and sort of spread around, it does look like about 1.25 inches of headspace, so that one is good. Now, a good reason for using the funnel is just to keep a lot of the chicken's yuckiness off of the rims of the jars, because you want really clean rims on your jars to make sure that they're going to seal well. So we will clean them off before we add our lids, but the less you get on there to begin with, the better. So that's why I'm using a funnel, even though I'm sure I could easily get these pieces of chicken into these wide mouth jars without it. Now, I don't add salt when I'm canning my chicken typically. If you want to add salt, you can go ahead and add salt. It would be 1/2 teaspoon for these pints, or a teaspoon if you're doing quarts. You just want to make sure that you're using canning and pickling salt, or another good salt with no additives in it. Now, I don't choose to use salt most of the time, because I just think when I'm using cooked chicken breast for something, for a recipe, for chicken salad, things like that, I typically wouldn't salt that chicken before cooking it. I'm going to season it afterwards as I'm preparing the dish. So that's just why I choose not to do it. But if you want to add salt, go ahead. It's just a personal preference. So today, while I'm canning this chicken breast, I thought of a little experiment that I wanted to try. Now, one of our family's most favorite recipes that we use chicken breast in is a dish that we either call it orange chicken or frankenberry chicken. We really don't know the name of this dish, but we've been making it for years. It's very simple. You just take the chicken breast, You take a bottle of creamy French dressing, a jar of jellied cranberry sauce, or can actually, and a packet of onion soup mix. And this makes the sauce for the chicken. And normally I make the sauce up and I put it in the pan, put the chicken breasts in the pan, or you could do it in a crock pot and bake it or cook it in the crock pot until the chicken is done. It makes a delicious sauce. It's great served over rice. We love this dish. This is my 10-year-old's favorite dish that I make. She learned how to make it herself at a pretty young age because it's so simple. So what I thought I would do is try mixing up the sauce and mixing up chunked chicken with it and try pressure canning it that way and see if we could have that dish already made and shelf stable so that we could just open a jar or two, heat it up, and serve it over rice. That would be super, super convenient for our family, and I want to see how that would work. So this is an experiment. Now let me know down in the comments, do you make a chicken dish like this? And if so, what do you call it? I know there's different variations on this recipe. I've seen some where it calls for apricot preserves in place of the cranberry sauce, maybe a different type of dressing such as Russian dressing, but they're all basically the same. And next we're going to go ahead and add the cranberry sauce. And now the onion soup mix. And then it's just these 3 ingredients, and you just use a whisk to combine them. Now I know this sounds like a strange combination, but trust me, it is delicious. Everyone that tries this recipe loves it. And part of the beauty of it is that it is so easy, but having it already fixed up in jars would make it even easier. Now I really hope this works because I think I'm going to just do the whole batch. I thought about maybe just trying a jar or two and saving the rest of the sauce to just cook the regular way that we usually do, but we just had this for dinner the other night. In fact, we still have some of the leftovers in the fridge, so I think I'm just going to take the leap and try the whole batch and hope that it comes out well. Now, I know I mentioned we sometimes call this dish orange chicken. My daughter kind of coined that term just because it is an orange colored dish. I don't really care for that name because there is the Chinese food dish of orange chicken, and that's not what this is, but it's just kind of habit. We never knew what to call this dish, and so that's what we started calling it a lot of the time. Kind of like our cat. We never gave the cat a name, so we just call it Orange Kitty. We've got Orange Kitty and Orange Chicken. All right, so I've got all but one of the breasts in that pack cut up in this bowl. I'm going to stop here for now because number one, I don't think this bowl will hold anymore. But number two, you don't want, you want a pretty good sauce to chicken ratio. This is not a dish where the sauce just coats the chicken and that's it. This is a dish where there's all kinds of extra sauce. It soaks into your rice. People love the sauce. Sometimes we'll just eat rice with leftover sauce. So I don't want to have too much chicken. Not to mention that every piece of chicken is going to put off its own liquid as it cooks, and that's going to mix into the sauce. And that does add to the sauce, but if there's too much chicken, it might affect it and make the sauce not what we're used to. So I think this is going to be how I'm going to do this. So that was about a 4.5 pound pack of chicken, and there's one breast left in there. It was the smallest breast. So I'm going to say this is probably about 3 3/4 to 4 pounds of chicken in here. I'm just going to make sure that the sauce is kind of evenly mixed into the chicken and that each piece of chicken is coated. And then we're going to try to distribute the sauce and chicken evenly as we put it into the jars. All right, so I'm going to start filling these jars. Now, like I said, this is an experiment. I don't know how many jars this is going to make. We're just going to go till this is done. This amount of chicken and sauce is what I would usually cook for one dinner for our family, but we would definitely have leftovers. We always have leftovers when we serve this. So I would say each one of these jars is probably going to serve at least about 2 people. Of course, like anything else, that's going to depend on how hungry those people are and how big of eaters they are. We have some people in our family who eat a lot more than others, obviously. And I am going to debubble this as I go along and pack it down a little bit and make sure that we get all the air spaces out of this dish as best we can. It's a little bit hard to see the headspace here because the sauce did kind of mess up the jar as it went down, but that looks about good to me. All right, so it turns out that this is going to actually be a really handy way of doing this because I did have one jar that was going to fall just shy of being full. So I stuck one extra chunk of chicken from the chunks that I had extra, and I'm just going to add the extra sauce in on top of that. And that's going to make me have a full jar as opposed to one that would not be completely full. Because I've got a lot of sauce here that I can scrape out of the bowl now that I am done filling my jars. And this ended up being 6 jars. All right, so I got 6 jars of this mixture, and now I'm going to go back to doing my plain chicken. I'm going to go rinse off my canning funnel and anything else that I need to continue using, and I will be right back. All right, so now I'm going to go back to cutting the rest of my chicken and filling my jars of plain chicken. I wanted to get this sauced dish out of the way first because I wasn't sure how much chicken I was going to end up using, so I wanted to do that before I used too much of my other chicken. So I'm going to get the rest of these jars filled, and then we'll get them ready to go in the canner. All right, so everything is done. What I've ended up with here is 11 pints of the plain chicken, and then the 6 pints of the recipe that I'm trying out. I do have one almost full breast left here that I decided to leave because one of our favorite dishes to have in the summertime is a tortellini salad, and I make it a main dish salad. I put chicken, broccoli, grape tomatoes, sometimes black olives with the tortellini, and we can have that just for a cold supper. And we always bring that camping to eat on the first night when we get there. And we're leaving for camping here pretty soon, so I wanted to make sure I have at least one chicken breast to cook up. I'll marinate this in Italian dressing, and I'll bake it till it's done, dice it up, and just stick it in the freezer, and it'll be ready to throw into our tortellini salad whenever I make that up. I wish I had actually gotten more of the sale chicken so that I could have kept a little bit more in the freezer for that purpose, but it is what it is, and hopefully I'll find another good sale soon. Now I do have my pressure canner behind me on the stove, and I'm going to be putting 3 quarts of water in. I'm just using this half-gallon mason jar to measure the water. I'm going to need 12 cups, so I've got it filled up to the 6-cup point, and then I'll do that twice. But like I mentioned before, we are cold pack canning, so we're doing cold jars, cold canner, cold water. So this is cold water, and I'm going to leave that canner turned off until I've got my jars loaded in. So what I'm going to do now, I've got my canner on the stovetop ready to go. My jars are all ready to go. I'm just going to wipe the rims, and I'm going to be using really, really hot water and a clean paper towel. Now, I've always wiped with vinegar. That's what they always tell you to do, but I've seen a couple people lately saying that they've been wiping with hot water, and they've had less lid failures, seal failures, than they did when they used vinegar. So I'm going to give that a try. These rims should be pretty clean already because I did use my funnel. And I did take the jars of the sauce recipe. I gave them a really good wiping with a hot, wet dish rag on the outside, just because in all my usual grace and glory, I did make kind of a mess. And it won't hurt anything as long as there's nothing right on the rim where the jar is going to seal. But you can make a mess in your canner if you have things on the outside of the jar. So I did give those a good wiping. I'm going to clean the rims of everything with my hot water. And then I'm going to add my lids and rings and be ready to get them in the canner. I am going to have to use probably more than one canner or more than one load because I have too many jars to fill my small Presto canner. So I'm going to fill that up and get that going. Then I'm probably going to get out my electric canner, get a small batch going in that, and I'm still going to have at least one more batch to do when that's all done with. It's times like these that I wish that I had a bigger canner or another pressure canner. So I'll probably eventually get one, but for now this is what I have to work with. All right, so now that I've got all of my rims wiped, I'm going to start putting on my lids and my rings. Now, I'm going to try something new. I did get this nifty gadget, which is supposed to help you tighten the rings exactly the right amount. You just match up the 2 arrows. I've never used this before, but I saw some people who were swearing by it on one of my canning groups, and they said that they never had a seal failure when they used this because they tell you to tighten your rings finger tight. And some people don't really understand exactly what that is. I mean, what it really means is you're supposed to tighten your bands just with 3 fingers so that they don't get overly tightened. But it's a difficult kind of concept to grasp. So I thought I would give this a try just to see how it works and kind of give a review on it. All right, so let's see how this goes. So that should be the perfect amount of tightness. All right, I think I have enough jars ready here to go in the canner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill up my canner and get that batch going, and then I'll do the rest of the jars. Now, because I'm doing cold pack, nothing is hot, so I don't have to worry about burning myself. I'm just going to go ahead and place these jars right in the canner. I've got my rack in there. You always want to make sure that you're using a rack. You don't ever want to set your jars right on the bottom of your canner. All right, so that's 8 pints. I've got my canner on. It's kind of on a medium-high heat. One thing I've learned is that you really want to avoid really quick changes in temperature and pressure. And if you can bring things up to temperature and up to pressure gradually, when you're pressure canning up and down gradually, you're going to avoid a lot of issues like siphoning and things like that. So I'm going to bring this up to temperature slowly, even though it's hard to wait and I want to get this done. I'm going to slowly heat this until I start to see steam coming out of my thingy here on the top, and then we're going to vent the steam for 10 minutes before we add our weight and bring it up to pressure. So I know you probably can't see it, but there is steam coming out of this little thingy. So I have my timer set for 10 minutes, and I'm going to let the steam vent for 10 minutes, and then we're going to add our pressure weight. All right, so I've got my Nesco electric pressure canner out here, and this fits 5 pints. Now I like this because it helps me do overflow, and it helps me do small batches if I just have a little bit of something. In this case, I have a lot of something, but this is gonna just help me get a little bit more done at a time. Now the problem with the Nesco is it calls for adding hot water to the pot. It calls for adding 8 cups of hot water. So what I've seen some people do is when you're doing cold pack and you want to start with cold water, sometimes it won't function right if you don't start with hot water. So what they do is they add an extra cup of water and then run it on the brown function for a little bit just to heat the water, and then start the pressure cycle. So that's what I'm going to do. I've added an extra cup of water, and I'm just going to let it brown until the water heats, and that way the jars will heat gradually with the water like it did in our stovetop can. All right, so now that this has vented for 10 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add on my weight. This has got 10 pounds of pressure on it because I am under 1,000 feet of altitude. You'll have to adjust for your own altitude, but I'm going to go ahead and put the weight on. And then we're going to let that get back up to pressure. Once again, I'm not going to crank the heat up too high. We want this to be gradual so that we can avoid problems. So we're going to bring this back up to pressure, and once this starts jiggling at a gentle rock, then we're going to start timing our processing time, which is going to be 75 minutes for pints of meat. All right, so now that I have had this on brown for a while, I don't know if you can see it, but it is starting to steam. There's steam coming out of this, so that means the water has heated up. The jars have heated up gradually with the water. So now I'm going to get started on the pressure canning time and the pressure canning cycle in this electric canner. So to get started with the canning, first I am going to cancel the browning. And then I'm going to go ahead and close the lid and lock it. So you just bring it down and turn it, and it locks. And then I'm going to go ahead and press high. This is for high pressure canning. And then we're going to do the time. So we need 75 minutes, just like we are with our stovetop canner, because this is pints of meat. Okay, and then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make sure that this valve is set to exhaust, which it is. And so I'm going to go ahead and press start. Now it's going to cycle like this. And that's going to continue to cycle until the internal temperature is reached. And that can take a little while. But that's why we started by bringing the water up to a hot temperature, even though we started from cold before we started the cycle. Because otherwise, if it takes too long to come up to temperature, it can cancel out the cycle and malfunction. So it is going to do this until it is the right temperature, and then it's going to give us a beep, and it's going to read E10. That means that it's exhausting for 10 minutes, just like we did with the stovetop canner. Then it's going to start counting down from 10, and when it gets down to 0, it's going to beep again, and at that point we are going to change this valve up top to the airtight position. And after that, it's going to start its countdown, and it's going to do the rest of it for us. All right, so now that our weight is doing a gentle little rocking, I'm going to start the time for processing. And that is 75 minutes, and of course my timer wants to call that an hour and 15 minutes, but I always get thrown off anytime someone refers to it as an hour and 15 minutes. It throws me because I'm just so used to saying 75 minutes. And that's all there is to it. We're going to let it go till our time is up. All right, so this has just beeped, and now it says E10, so it's exhausting for 10 minutes. There's nothing that we have to do except pay attention, because when this countdown is done, there is going to be one more thing we have to do. Almost done. All right, so now that that time is up, we are going to go up here. And we're just going to set this to the airtight position. And that's all we have to do. It's going to say this until it's at pressure, and then it's going to beep one more time and start our time countdown. And now it's just chasing until it's ready. All right, so it did just beep and start the countdown. So now we've got 75 minutes to go for processing. All right, you can see our time is up on the stovetop canner, so I've turned off the timer. I'm going to stop the burner. And I am going to remove the canner from the heat, and I'm just going to let it set. We're going to let it set until all the pressure is released, which means that this button is going to pop down. When this button falls down, we'll know all the pressure is released from the canner. Now, when you move the canner, you want to make sure that you lift and place it over, and don't slide or drag it across the burner because it can definitely scratch your stovetop. All right, so that there means the time is up. So now what I'm going to do is unplug this canner, and I'm just going to let it set for about an hour to naturally release the pressure, just like the stovetop canner. All right, so our little button just dropped down, which means now we're going to just wait 10 more minutes, and then we get to open our canner and check out our chicken. All right, there's our time. Now we get to open it up and check out how our chicken came out. Now we always want to open our canner away from us in case any steam comes out so we don't get burned. So you just turn the lid until it unlocks and then tip it up away from yourself. Now I've got a towel laid out on my countertop that I can go ahead and set these on to give them time to cool. So let's go ahead and check out the chicken. Wow, look at that. It's still bubbling and it looks absolutely beautiful. You can see that the juices have come out of the chicken and covered it right up. I'm going to get these out and let them start cooling, and then we'll take a look. All right, so finally the moment of truth. We get to open up the Nesco and see how these came out. Now, something to note is that this does have a safety feature, kind of like Instant Pots, where if there's still pressure inside of the canner, it's not going to let you open the lid. So now that I can turn the lid, I know that it's ready to open. All right, there's our pints. Now let's see how they look. Okay, so the hardest part about this is that how tightly I had them packed in there. I was not able to get my jar opener inside to actually get it around a jar. So I actually had to use a couple pairs of oven mitts to get the first jar out. But it is looking good. Now these actually look really great. I'm already hearing them sealing. You can see they're still bubbling. The sauce looks good. It looks like it typically looks... Now you can see there's a little bit of a darker layer down here, and I think that's just a separation of the sauce. Now when I'm cooking in the oven, I would usually stir the sauce a little bit every once in a while to kind of keep it blended. So I think that once these jars are cool, I can probably give them a little shake and the sauce will blend right back together. I'm not going to do that now. We got to make sure that they cool and seal up properly. But we will let these cool and see where we're at. And I've got just enough jars that I can run one more load in my Nesco and have all the rest of this chicken finished. Now let me just say, you can see how clear and clean the water is in this canner, and it was the same in my stovetop canner. I really had no issues with siphoning or anything like that this time, which I tend to have quite a bit. So I'm really impressed with this jar tightener, and also being really careful about the headspace and bringing our temperatures and pressure up gradually. I think that all helped a lot. Now just look at all of these pints of chicken that we have preserved. This is food security. This is financial security. This is amazing. I honestly don't know why they call this ugly chicken, because to me, this is a thing of beauty. Now the thing that you'll notice about these chicken, the recipe, is that the sauce does separate, but you can go ahead and just give that a little bit of a mix and it's going to come right together, and that's totally normal even when you bake this in the oven or the crock pot or however else I've made this recipe. The sauce can tend to separate as it's cooking, and the sauce will separate when it is put away as leftovers. Just mix it back together and it will be fine. So let's open up one of these jars and see how this tastes, the true test. All right, so let's see how this chicken came out. I'm gonna try this little trick that I saw somewhere. Worked pretty well, but it did ding the lid, which was what I was hoping it would not do. I definitely could have used a smaller pot for this. You see the chicken just breaks right apart. This is just going to be heat and eat. Alright, so this is nice and hot, and I have a dish of hot white rice. I'm just going to put this right over the rice. Let the sauce soak in. I'll definitely say the sauce is not as thick after canning, and the chicken is not as attractive. This is what I would call ugly chicken right here. But it seems to taste just about the same, so we're going to give it a try. That tastes pretty good. That is definitely worth doing again for the ease of it. And here's the real test. Miss Picky, who this is her favorite dish. What do you think, honey?
It's really good. Tastes like the original.
Yeah. Okay. Doesn't look quite as pretty, but it tastes good, huh?
Mhm.
I am glad. And the cool thing is, I know you know how to make this from scratch, but this is even easier. All you have to do is open a can and heat it up. Awesome. Now I will say, if I was doing some more of this, I might do some quarts, because this is enough for about 2 servings in the pint, 2 people. So if we were serving the whole family, we probably want a quart or more. Okay guys, so there you have it. We now have 17 pints of chicken, and we've frozen that price in time for months worth of eating down the road at today's prices. There are so many ways you can do this, whether you can, dehydrate, or freeze dry. You are locking in today's prices for future eating. You can also take advantage of anything that you can get for free, like produce from a neighbor's garden that they offer up when they have an abundance, or fruit from an orchard, farm stand deals, grocery store surplus if you have a produce rescue of some sort in your area. There's so many ways that you can get good deals or free items that you can preserve for hard times in the future. If you want to see some more about canning different foods, check out our canning playlist, and we'll be adding to that as often as we can. I hope you enjoyed this video and got some useful tidbits from it. If you did, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone else who might appreciate it. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a snowflake emoji for freezing those prices. Thank you for sticking with me today. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.